Good morning to everyone, or good afternoon for those who will be joining from another time zone. I'm Nadia Sidawi, the Chief of Energy at the Regional Commission of Western Asia, and I have the pleasure to moderate this session. It's about an expert group meeting that we organize in the framework of the International Energy Forum for Sustainable Development that is organized annually with our sister organizations of 5 regional commissions. The purpose of this expert group meeting is actually to look at the financial aspect, let's say, finance for those who need it. From the perspective of this webinar, who will need it are those, from our perspective, is look at in the region where we operate, the Arab region, that cover almost 22 countries in North Africa, in the Mashriq and the GCC, while focusing on the real context and how to de-risk the small-scale renewable energy technologies in productive sector, since this is the dominant activity in the rural context. The webinar will be lasting for 90 minutes and will include setting the scene, a presentation on the working paper that ESCWA team is working on it. My colleague Mustafa will be presenting that and will give certain insight on the work that we are doing in order to obviously look at other perspectives from different regions. And we will be following by 3 presentations from different experts and then a panel discussion followed by a short Q&A depending on how time would allow. And we will have, if the presenters and the panelists would allow, to have a family photo. Just to mention to the panelists that just to keep the video and camera off till they are asked to open them, so we can have obviously focusing on the one who is presenting. And then obviously for the participant, if they have any questions since we started the end, is just to put them in the chat box and the presenters can undertake them whether simultaneously or at the end. With that, I would like to give the floor to my colleague Mustafa for the setting the scene on the context of this webinar, and more importantly on the purpose of this webinar in looking to de-risking renewable energy investment. Hand over to you, Mustafa.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Radia. I'd like to just start off by briefly covering some of the questions associated with today's expert group meeting. So the aim is to answer a central question. What are the business models that can be used to overcome the barriers preventing the greater uptake of small-scale renewable energy for productive use in the Arab region? Following on, what are the barriers seen around the world and what are the barriers in the region? What can we learn from what's happening globally in addressing various barriers and risks to financing small-scale renewable energy in rural areas? What are the financial and policy instruments that can be employed to bridge the gap between finance and renewable energy projects for productive use? And how can we develop platforms that can effectively match lenders with developers with end users? Insights from today's event will be integrated into a report on de-risking small-scale renewable energy in rural areas through microfinance and matchmaking. And we encourage all of today's experts to share with us case studies to be incorporated. And if anyone in the audience has insights to share, please send those after the event as well. So, sustainable energy for all, SDG 7, weaves all the sustainable development goals. It's a critical enabler and it contributes to economic development. This is why interventions in sectors cannot be undertaken in isolation, and an integrated approach is necessary for effective outcomes. Small-scale renewable energy can positively transform small rural communities, lift millions out of energy poverty by creating jobs, and build resilience to climate change. Whilst there's no shortage of projects that can be implemented in the Arab region, the story in most, if not all, developing countries is the same. The markets are undeveloped and fragmented, the barriers are multifaceted, and the perceived risks are too high. Thank you for that, Kevin. In light of this, one of the areas we are focusing on, and in line with enabling a just and inclusive energy transition, is the ramp up of small-scale renewable energy for productive use in rural areas of the Arab region. In so doing, we are confident that it will greatly improve livelihoods in rural communities, spur entrepreneurial development, and empower women and other vulnerable groups. So I'd like to start with a bit of a regional context, provide some background on the challenges we need to solve in the Arab region. Despite achieving 90% electrification in 2020, the Arab region is still falling short in achieving SDG 7. In fact, a closer look will show that 98% of urban areas in the Arab region had access to electricity, compared with only 82% in rural areas. Now, this rural-urban divide was even more prominent in Arab LDCs, least developed countries, where urban electricity access was 83%, while access in rural areas was only 47%. In 2019, renewable energy accounted for less than 5% of the region's final energy consumption, with biomass accounting for the lion's share. Although the focus here is on renewable energy, the acceleration of small-scale renewable energy uptake in the region will not only increase its share in final energy consumption, but tackle the remaining access deficit head-on, while its integration with energy-efficient productive equipment will also support the achievement of SDG 7 by 2030. At present, the number of initiatives attempting to address small-scale renewable energy for productive use in rural areas remains relatively low in the region. That is why in December 2017, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA, and ESCWA signed an agreement that led to the creation of REGENT, the regional initiative to promote small-scale renewable energy applications in rural areas of the Arab region. The project aimed to improve the livelihood, economic benefits, social inclusion, and gender equality of Arab rural communities, particularly marginalized groups, by addressing energy poverty, water scarcity, and vulnerability to climate change. This was pursued through using appropriate small-scale renewable energy technologies for productive activities and entrepreneurial development. REGENT also addressed the underlying constraints in the rural environment and operational market mechanisms within the Arab region. And I encourage all of our participants to visit the REGENT page of the ESCWA website for more details, as well as on reviewing the suite of reports and toolkits produced in tandem, covering policy, operational, and business models. Now, whilst the REGENT model was primarily donor-funded, the understanding is that these integrated approaches are self-sustaining in the long run, but the associated risks need to be overcome in order to ensure that financing can be upscaled. First, we are referring to small-scale renewable energy, which encompasses anything up to 100 kilowatt, and serving a small number of beneficiaries, meaning that the fixed cost component of time and human capital dedicated is relatively larger compared to the return. Second, there is a specific distinction that we are not discussing electricity, but economic development, and hence renewable energy for productive use, meaning that whilst the former often falls under the responsibility of the government, the latter, which targets poverty reduction and improved livelihoods, is far more complex to sell, and the role of international financial institutions is still nascent, yet the financing could be more lucrative. Third, whilst the discussion is associated with financing small-scale renewable energy, the productive use component means that an integrated approach will face additional challenges, from the lack of coordination across sectors and therefore potentially overlapping regulations and instruments, to the absence of a common language amongst the various stakeholders. Fourth, a number of capacity risks exist, which stems from the very perceived risks that developers or lenders place in the context of rural areas, not least due to the lack of familiarity and general exposure to the area, to the lack of skills that end users possess in being able to put their projects out, securing finance, operate and maintain the systems, as well as the capacity to lead and grow productive activities. Last, and certainly not least, in almost all the risks perceived, they are exacerbated in the context of gender. Women in rural areas are severely disadvantaged when it comes to their ability to access suitable finance, present collateral, and in taking out loans. Moreover, in some rural areas, there is the additional dimension of social and environmental acceptance of women-led cooperatives, entrepreneurs, and more generally, women as breadwinners. Small-scale renewable energy for productive use is gaining traction globally, but remains rather limited in the Arab region. We have some understanding of the barriers, but today we hope to learn more on what instruments will be required to de-risk investments. These include policy and regulatory instruments. We can agree that legal frameworks will need to be fit for purpose and address trade-offs and synergies. Capacity building will need to be addressed across the board, from government institutions to financiers, product developers, and certainly for end users. More sophisticated finance that is tailored to the unique needs of each and every community and/or end user is necessary to account for varying circumstances and conditions. And the use of climate finance in the Arab region remains negligible and opaque for many, and there is great opportunity to unlock further financing. Last, mobilizing finance is equally as important as the need to match lenders with developers with end users. So how can we design effective platforms that can connect the dots and play a supporting role thereafter? With that, I'm confident that our esteemed panelists will be able to shed some light on some of their experiences and case studies from other parts of the world to help inform our understanding and in the delivery of the initial draft of our report. I'll hand over back to Rabia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. And as I highlighted in your presentation, we've been looking from the Arab regional perspective through the region project. And obviously, this is the follow-up that we want to do since we experienced at the implementation that there is certainly a lack of coordination between the different sectors and how to attract the private sector to engage in this kind of project. And that's why I would like, I have the honor to have with us Mr. Quentin Paris-Joy. He's the business development in Angie, and obviously your experience in the African continent would be very instrumental to look at from your perspective the examples on the African continent. Over to you, Angie. And if you can please share your presentation and put your video up. Thank you.
Yes, can you hear me and can you see me?
Yes, you don't have slides, so please go ahead. And we have an excellent background, so you can tell us about Tanzania.
Yes, indeed. So hello, everyone. Sabah Nur for those speaking Arabic a bit. So I'm working for NG, and NG in Africa is focusing on energy access, meaning that we want to connect the 600 million people to clean electricity. So here we can see what is a mini grid. A mini grid, a solar mini grid, is basically a solar plant that connects different households and business to the village. So we install the solar plants, the batteries, and then we install poles, wires, and smart meters to connect the different people in the village. So basically what we do is that we invest in the assets, and then we sell electricity to the customers, to the villagers directly, in order to reimburse the investment. So those are the different, so there are three actually techniques or solutions to electrify the rural areas. The classical one, let's say, is the national grid extension, where we simply extend the lines, the transmission lines. The problem is that it's quite costly. It's very costly, actually. It's between $30,000 and $60,000 per kilometer. So if you want to connect a village that is at 20 kilometers, for example, is more than $1 million just for the transmission. While with this type of mini grid solution, it's half or even less the price. Then the other approach is solar home system, which is a very good approach with solar kits and small batteries to connect only one household that is very isolated. The issue with this approach is that you cannot connect productive usage of energy because the capacity, the power capacity is limited, and the energy also is limited. So mini grid is actually a good balance between the national grid and solar system in order to connect rural areas and also to connect any type of machine. The issue is that we have to find a business model that is viable. And this is what we have been doing for the last years at NG. And the issue initially was that we invest in the assets. We sell the electricity as revenues. So we need to make sure that the revenues are above the cost in order to sustain the activity. And the only way to do that is actually to make sure that large parts of energy consumed in the village will be consumed in the form of electricity and not diesel, not petrol, etc. If we only connect people using bulbs and phone charging, which is a very common energy usage in rural Africa, we will not be able to reimburse these assets. So we need to actually connect big energy consumers in order to have important electricity demand and enough revenues. So what we are trying to do for the last years is to actually replace all machines using diesel by machines using electricity. So we do that in different sectors. It can be agribusiness, food conservation, crafting, small industries, water, telecom, tower, or also transport with electric mobility, etc. The issue is that it's not necessarily easy to change machines. First, is that the owner of the machine, they don't necessarily have the access to capital, because machines for this sector are quite expensive. So they don't have access necessarily to capital. So we help them to have access to this capital by either partnering with microfinance institutions, either sometimes taking ourselves the risk to buy the machine and to sell the machines to the owner in leasing, or sometimes to rent the machine to the owner, or even sometimes we use ourselves the machines, we operate the machine and sell the service as such. Another issue for the shifting of machines is the access to energy efficient machines. So this is also why we need some people on the ground to help those owners of machines or to replace the machines to have access to energy efficient machines. We also need to help them to learn to use new machines. Sometimes the new machines are a bit more complex in terms of electronics, etc. So we need to help them. So that's why we partner with NGOs to train them, to train the owners of machines to use their new machines. And of course, there's the maintenance question: how to maintain the machines during the lifetime of the machine, 5 years, 10 years, etc. And here again, we work with NGOs to train the owners on the maintenance and usage of machine. But for big machines, such as water pump, big water pump for irrigation system, for example, or if we want to purify water in the water sector, or for example, in the case of food conservation, if we want to produce a large amount of ice to conserve the food, or if we want to also to buy important meal to milling the maize, for example, for flour, most of the time the capital requested is too important. And so the small owner, the small villagers, the small businessmen in the villages, they don't have the capacity in any case. Even if we help them with microfinance, they will not have the capacity to actually buy and acquire the machine. So in most of the time, we actually need to have what we call a middleman, meaning someone who has the capacity to invest in the machine, to buy the electricity from us, and then to produce the service and to sell the service to the market around the village. So this is what we do. Just to give you a couple of examples, in the island of Lolwe in Uganda, in Lake Victoria. So we are not in Tanzania now. I don't have another background for the Lake Victoria, but imagine it's a large lake, the biggest lake in Africa, in Central Africa. Actually, the source of the Nile going very close to Lebanon. So we are connected by the Nile. And there are different islands. And in one island, there is, we have installed actually big ice machines with also purifier machines where we actually pump the water from the lake. Then we purify it. Part of the water that is purified goes to the ice machines. The ice is then used for the fishermen to conserve the fish. The fishing activity is the main activity in the lake, of course. And the other part of the water is then used, the purified water is then used for drinking water. So at the beginning, we wanted to do that by ourselves, but actually selling water, drinking water when we are an energy company is not easy. We are not experts in water. We don't know anything about quality of water, and we don't want to take risk to actually put people sick. So what we did is that we find a middleman, which is actually in this case Jibu, a local company that's expert in purification. And in this case, they have invested in the pumps, in the purification system. They have some staff that knows exactly how to do the test for quality, to make sure that the water we sell is with enough quality, and they certify it. And then we put the water into the bottle to distribute the energy, to distribute the bottle. So in this model, we as energy experts only do the energy part, and Jibu, the middleman, they buy the water, they buy the electricity, and then they sell the water to the people. So this is what we try to do also in irrigation system. We don't want to manage irrigation system. We just want to manage energy system where we produce and distribute energy. So in Ethiopia, another example, we are building a project where we will sell electricity to a middleman, an irrigation service provider that is operating the irrigation system, buy the power from us, and then sell the water to the farmers in order to irrigate their land. So this is basically what we are doing. I could give other example, but yeah, basically we need to have people investing in the energy productive unit energy sector in order to have those middlemen. So happy to have. I hope I was not too long. And happy to have
thank you
questions.
very much. Actually, it shows that the innovative solutions to look at how to de-risk your investment, or like with the operating companies or sharing risk with the water, those who invest in the water facilities, and the obviously the contract, in a way that at the end you remain in your business area while collaborating with others and trying to adjust the issues of the risk, and also the collaboration with the microfinancing. And obviously that it's clear that the innovative solutions are much more on the business company than that what regulators and financial institutions are necessarily providing. We'll come to that in next, and we'd like also to hear from our friend from Hivos, and greeting to Chela also and colleagues from the Energia, working on the how to support the women empowerment and gender equality in the energy sector, specifically the enormous work that is done in Asia, but in Africa. And so we move to the Asian and look into the experience from the Asian perspective. I would like to hear from Sandra Winarsa. She is the Program Development Coordinator at Hivos. If you can tell us from your perspective, look into how to de-risk investment or small-scale renewable energy technologies in a real context from a gender perspective. Over to you, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you, Radia. And thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me, and very interesting sessions. Just allow me to have a slide. It will be like very short slide. Hold on a second. Yeah, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, to contribute to the discussions when it comes to small-scale financing for decentralized renewable. Thank you, Radia, for highlighting some of our works in Africa. I'm going to share you a little bit on our experience in Asia. So basically, we work in 3 countries at this stage: is Indonesia. Hold on a second. Okay, so in the last 10 years, we are very much focusing on the decentralized renewable energy and productive use of energy. So I'm going to give some of example from a real experience that we have. So what we did is that we work in several productive use of energy solutions with the community in the basis of proving the various kind of business model that works for them. So our funders, basically from multilaterals, donors, we also work with local entrepreneurs at the village level, and also product developers and project developers from outside the country. So so we do solar for solar charging, for kiosk, solar water pumping for irrigations, ICS for salt farmers. We also do power for craftsmanships, with different types of business model, like working with cooperatives, working with MFI, leasing model, pay-as-you-go model. So we have those kind of lessons learned. But what all in all, the red line that we can emphasize is also that these communities are pretty much sitting at the front stage or the front row when it comes to climate change. And when it comes to climate finance, there are very, very low kind of imbalance, the allocations that is being dedicated for reaching out. There are no data whatsoever, available out there, but less than 10% went to these communities. So I'm going to give what I call a highlights when it comes to opportunities and barriers, both coming from the supply and the demand side from our experiences. So basically in Indonesia and probably in other places in developing countries, we all know that the opportunities lies within the commitment and the on the low carbon economy. We just had a G20 where international pledge 20 million US dollar for energy transitions, which is good and positive. And the other opportunity is that the productive use of energy in Indonesia is not being categorized services. So meaning it is actually legal because we are not competing with a state utility company when it comes to electricity services to homes or to houses. And in the country, we have lots of growing available blended finance facilities, especially peer-to-peer lending, especially when it comes to servicing for those who are non-bankable, basically, and philanthropic as well, starting to pretty much introducing their funding to also filling in some gaps when it comes to vulnerable groups. Growing incubation programs, I think it's happening everywhere in Southeast Asia, with startups providing innovative solutions for small scale and renewable energy solutions basically. From the user's perspective, the opportunity is that we still have like 4,700 households that is still unelectrified. So these are actually your market, the market to actually go in there and then sell. And they also very much eager to improve their economic, especially after COVID. And they are really much, early adopters, enthusiasts that they're pretty much quickly in terms of solution that was being offered. The barrier, however, when it comes to working with what we call technology provider, coming in, there are very kind of limited affordable option for plug and play products that is available. And usually when it already available, then there's still a big homework when it comes to repair services. That probably DC equipment is practically being categorized as the most efficient when it comes to decentralized renewable, but this problem exists when it comes to a limited option and repair. MFI, like Quentin had mentioned, we also work with MFI to also prove the business case that it can be sustainable, though it is started off by grant funding, but collaborating with MFI, we are expecting that the business model works, and the replacement can be actually made available through local entrepreneurs out there. And the MFI is actually lacking knowledge of RE solutions. They are also lacking of to how much money that they can contribute for RE solutions, and therefore very limited loan products that they can deliver, especially when it comes to commitment that I said in the opportunities, largely scale for coal transition, for example. In terms of the barrier from the user side, I think it's almost similar everywhere. Small community needs a very flexible loan. Otherwise, then there will be high default payment. So this is something that the element of de-risk need to also consider what sort of business model that is affordable for the targeted communities, group of communities. The issue of collateral is also exists in Asia. Share what you have mentioned earlier as well. And so this is also limiting the inclusion. As we know, those who only have an assets can actually get, access to financing, especially, the men usually considered as a head of household. Therefore, women is very, limited in having this access to this kind of financing. Information as well is not so much easy to access. The innovative solution is there, but the kind of innovative solution with the business model can reach them is very limited, and the prioritization in the policy at this stage, again, still focusing on the large scale. So when it comes to the is really on the financing side and how to actually have enough, have a small portion from the climate finance that coming into the country catered to this sector. So these are part of the enablers that we can analyze. The first one is on the capacity building and technical assistance. Basically, how to reach out those climate finance complicated requirements, to be for a medium or to small scale finance, so that it is much more inclusive and much more reachable for the community. How to fulfilling the requirements, have to submit a proposal, for example, that is still lacking at this stage. Second is on the fiscal and non-fiscal incentives, because reaching out to poor communities usually high on social return but low on financial return. So basically on how we can balance this out with an incentive both for coming from fiscal and non-fiscal, that is still not available at this stage. What would be the framework that is workable to reach out the vulnerable groups when it comes to inclusivity, like we're targeting, lacking at this stage. The third one is on the policy reform. At this stage, we can say that the policy is still up there, as a big umbrella, but it's still so high to reach on how, the how-to mechanism that is for players, both coming from the private developers and also both from the local entrepreneurs or the local MFI. So what we've done, we collect this kind of evidence from a first, and we work with the government and provide some some recommendation on how the policy gaps needs to be fulfilled in order to have this sustainable, or needs to address those 4,700 population that's still unserved. Lastly, I would like to support what Mustafa had mentioned at the beginning. Tools and platform basically is needed, especially when it comes to rural community. Is there is no some sort of like is demographic details that we can collect for project developers in projecting or designing their business model, or mitigating any kind of risk when they would like to enter. And also a matchmaking platform. I fully agree on that. That is focused on these middle to small scale players, or solutions that is non-existence. I'm quite what I call if tired is not the right word, but it's stick when it comes to that channels to small scale solution for de-risking is always being encountered with the high cost of management processes. It's the same between taking care of 10 million towards $10,000, for example. The cost is the same, so that's the reason why the being assigned for managing this climate finance really could not able to the scale to reach the local community that we aim to have. I stop there first, probably Radia for further question and answer later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for bringing the light, especially your last slide, look into the certain solutions. Obviously, that it's for the way we define it as inclusive financing, look into the enablers in terms of capacity building, the awareness still needed, but also an integrated approach in the way looking also how to unlock this investment and share the risk between the different players. I think in order to look at it, but I see that the Asian and the African context, we still have the same challenges because we speak about small scale, and obviously the fixed costs remain the same, and who will share this kind of risk. To move further in that, allow me to move to the next speaker, look into the other perspective from Kevin Johnston. Kevin is the senior researcher for energy and livelihood at the International Institute for Environment and Development. Kevin, one of the elements that previous speakers highlighted, especially previous speaker, will look into the gender aspects, and she did mention having assets in order to, obviously, as a warranty to have access to finance, specifically on the small scale. And good that you look at how the community engagement and gender equality and social inclusion in the context of microfinancing. Over to you, Kevin, if you can put your presentation on the screen.
Great, thanks so much, Radia. Let me share my screen. Should be able to see that.
Yes, we can see it. Just put it on us. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. Thanks so much, Radia and Mustafa, for inviting me to this event and for hosting the event. Pleased to be here. IID is one of the world's leading independent policy and action research organizations. Our mission is to build a fair, more sustainable world using evidence and through partnership. Just to start as a framing, we view energy, as has been spoken by many of our participants today, as an enabler of development sectors and household outcomes, not energy access as an end goal in itself. Renewable energy systems must be built off community needs, and engagement is also important to build understanding and buy-in to make business models financially and economically viable, and they must include elements of community engagement. So I'd just like to start with a quick introduction to gender equality and social inclusion, or GESI for short. So inequalities are deeply rooted in history through discriminatory social and economic policies, laws, institutions, and practices affecting women's and other marginalized groups' access to and use of productive resources. Men and women tend to have different priorities in energy services, and initiatives that do not consider these risk reinforcing existing inequality and therefore being unsustainable in the long term. Disaggregated data on the energy sector, as I think we all might know, is quite limited. However, proxy indicators can be useful. For example, in Kenya, women own roughly half of small businesses, but only access 7% of available credits. Further, women usually carry the double burden of domestic work and have less control over land, capital, and income. This limits their time and opportunities to invest in high-value, productive use of energy solutions, while men control most resources and are more able to invest as a result. So IID has been involved in productive uses for several years now. So today I want to focus on Tanzania and Kenya as well. So these are some of the communities that we've implemented with in Tanzania, with partners, companies, governments, and so forth. So we've worked on building demand for mini grids with Power Corner, which is actually now part of NG, and Rafiki Power, which is now Eon Off-Grid Solutions, which included curriculum using a gender lens. And we also worked with a mini grid developer called Chefa and MBC, working on micro business modeling and linking them to local SACCOs for appliance financing. And we also worked with Simisolar, a solar irrigation pump distributor and Sustainable Agriculture Tanzania, an NGO that works with female farmers to build out a better delivery model to reach more women, funded by Efficiency for Access. And finally, just to highlight some work in Kenya, where in Kitui County, we co-designed solutions for poultry and horticulture farmers with the Kitui County government, with communities and our partners, Caritas Kitui and Loughborough University, all funded by UK Pact. So I just wanted to highlight some brief learnings today. So a key notion on GESI is don't exacerbate gender inequalities or do no harm. Look for ways to minimize the risk, for example, including men in training programs as well as women. For stakeholder mapping and analysis, consider categories of socioeconomic data points, groups, and power dynamics. For example, land tenure is very important for collateral reasons, literacy levels for understanding laws and so forth, access to services and providers, government services, business inputs, access to financing is a key one, and so forth. Some guiding questions are here, which may be useful when thinking about how to engage your communities and who to engage with, who's furthest out of reach, who doesn't belong to organized groups, and so forth. To really make this concrete, here's just a quick example of a question we used in one of our baselines to investigate gender roles and dynamics in agricultural production, which are critical to building out viable farmer business models. So here on the left, we've got the farmer activity based throughout the season, and then it's split out by gender in the question, and that gives us an understanding of the different dynamics playing out at the household level. Should emphasize that this is all self-reported data, which has a particular bias, such as social desirability bias, which can be tricky when dealing with gender norms in specific contexts. So some additional learnings, especially from Kenya, from our work with our partners there, consider pre-workshops. So working specifically with marginalized groups to ensure that they understand the content and prep their solutions in a conducive space so they feel empowered during main workshops. Consider participants' various schedules. So when possible, avoid market days, for example, where many women go to sell goods, or other seasonal or value chain events such as weeding and plowing in the activities list that we saw on the previous slide. Aim for a gender balance with facilitators. So for example, matching male facilitators with male breakout groups and vice versa. Identify challenges for folks attending workshops. So especially consider gender norms around attending those workshops, childcare costs, transportation costs, and so forth. What's the opportunity cost for that individual to attend the workshop or event? Of course, excellent facilitation and management of workshops is critical, and this is generally true in most events, but avoid monopolizing conversations or exercising different power dynamics, paying attention to consensus, consider how decisions are made, especially when it comes to men and women. Provide safer spaces, so consider dividing breakout groups between men and women, youth and the elderly, and so forth, to break up power dynamics. Sometimes certain individuals don't feel comfortable speaking side by side. If possible, break out days where actors that have similar interests, community men, community women, farmers, fishers, etc., so that they can discuss things in advance and together, for example, in these pre-workshops that previously suggested. And this can help strengthen collective and shared interests. We recently published a briefing on our Kenya work that collated our collective learnings from the communities and partners. Just want to highlight a couple here. Governments and donors must strengthen groups, which are critical in many rural areas, which we've already discussed, Bikobas, women's farmers groups, and so forth, to reach more people experiencing marginalization. We found extension officers and farmers themselves tend not to recognize gender norms and inequalities. So extension services curricula must be redesigned with gender and inequality in mind, for example, in agriculture. and any co-designing must include discussions on gender roles. There is evidence that empowering women increases agricultural yields for both female and male managed farms, which is a rare win-win scenario. So talking about financial viability, there is evidence that it's there. And financing due diligence criteria should consider non-farm income generating activities. So looking beyond the farm, looking at livelihood diversification, looking at group membership in different community groups, and social networks to make asset-based financing more accessible, especially for women who face these extra barriers. Evidence shows that some women farmers are reluctant to invest in solar water pumps unless they can secure financing for other crucial farm inputs like high quality seeds and farm labors. So they have different risk profiles, many do, than men. And finally, gender inequality targets, budgeting, analyses, and monitoring to support implementation and iteration. A great start is disaggregated data, as is used by Kitui County governments, our partner in Kenya, and further disability and wealth status would allow projects to iterate and address various constraints, especially financing constraints experienced by more people. Finally, just to wrap up, what's next for us? We're looking at working with CGIAR's Gender Impact Platform, designing a framework for socio-technical innovation bundles, which is a bit academic, but basically looking at the ecosystem around productive uses, focusing on financing, on linking to markets and so forth in agriculture. And we're working on a framework for women's climate leadership to support a gender-just energy transition in the Climate Investment Fund's portfolio. Thanks so much. This is a women's group in Kirioka, Tanzania, who worked with us to co-design our gender-responsive delivery model with Simi Solar for solar irrigation pumps, which we hope to roll out in the coming months. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, and I think we are lucky today to have twice spoken on and have pictures from Tanzania. Thank you very much for sharing that. But more importantly, thanks for the work that your institution is doing in order to at least help in having certain indicators and methodologies in a way to gather data on gender aspect and support obviously the investment in renewable energy that is not also gender blind, and try to address the challenges in this respect. Since the whole work of this EGM, it's related to the entry point is obviously the inclusive approach for the gender inclusive energy transition, and the focus in the productive sector and small-scale renewable energy technologies. In order to learn from your business model, we see that the challenges, but also the solutions you provide are very much in line what we're trying to look at from the Arab regional perspective. And in order to look at this aspect, allow me to open the floor for the panel discussion, and before taking also the Q&A from the audience. And I would like to ask all the panelists to put their video on, if you don't mind. And we have, in addition to the speakers, Mr. Mounji Bida, he's a sustainable energy system consultant from Tunisia. And he worked specifically in Tunisia and the Arab region on the area related to renewable energy and energy efficiency. So in order to now to converge and try to focus on the Arab region perspective and where we want really to learn from your business model, your experiences, and obviously there's always reverse knowledge between the different continents and different players. I would like first to return back to the region, and I don't know, Mounji, are you connected? If you can put your video on.
Yes, I am connected.
Mounji, in brief, if we look at from the Arabic perspective, specifically Tunisia, what would you see the major challenges, but more importantly, the solutions, if we look at it from the inclusive approach in order to unlock financing for small-scale projects within in Tunisia, but also if you want to reflect on the region as well.
Thank you, Radia, for the invitation, and thank you, Mustafa, as well. I'm glad to be with you today. I would like to give you some idea about the work that has been done in Tunisia in terms of financing small-scale renewable energy systems. The work has been done in the context of national programs, national large-scale dissemination programs under the large title of the ProSol programs. These programs were launched initially more than 15 years ago. And there are two major programs, one for solar water heaters and one for grid-connected individuals photovoltaic systems. And within each of these within each of these programs, there are a set of sub-programs that target specific beneficiaries, like, for example, residential users and other sub-programs for non-residential end users. And currently, there are some more specific programs that are being designed. Actually, there are declinations of these programs that would target low-income households. And I think it can easily be adapted after a brief presentation of these programs. They can easily be adapted to the rural areas and in particular the productive solutions. One of the main features of these programs is that they involve many actors, many main actors in a consultation and cooperation process, and they are well structured. So, for example, if we look at the basic setup of these programs, they include a financing scheme, which provides a direct subsidy from the National Energy Transition Fund that can go up to 30% of the system cost. A loan with a lowered interest rate, also from the included in the financing scheme. And the loans are provided by a participating bank, which is formally engaged with the respected national program. And then the collection of the payments of the loans are ensured by the utility, through the utility bills, by the National Electricity and Gas Company, which is the STEG. And STEG is an active actor in these programs, and they make and guarantee the payments to the bank. So we have quite, a good financial de-risking of these loans by the involvement of the National Electricity Company. In the program, also, they rely on pre-approved participating suppliers and installers, as well as pre-approved equipment. And ANME which is the National Energy Conservation Agency, is the main actor in these approving processes. So we have also here the aspect of technical de-risking of these installations. The beneficiaries also go through a formal registration process in the program, and basically they are recruited by the installers themselves. And all of these steps and processes are well documented in procedures manuals, which are targeting the different actors. So we have a well-structured setup that ensures that we have very few risks that are run through the program. And by using these programs, thousands of beneficiaries were reached. As I said earlier, these programs, they can be easily extended or adapted to small-scale renewable energy in rural areas, including in the productive sector. And if we want to wrap up, what are the basic components of these programs, we see that at the national level, there is the intervention of the National Fund for Energy Transition through a direct subsidy and a loan interest rate reduction. Also now they are exploring other financing sources like the NAMA facility for one of the programs for PV systems, and also international donors that can contribute to these programs. At the national utility company level, there is an arrangement for connection to the grid of the PV systems, and also the agreement regarding the electricity net metering, and the involvement of the company in the financing schemes as a collector warrant of the loans. And the final component, which is also which ensures the technical integrity for these systems, is the pre-qualification process of the suppliers, installers, as well as the equipments for participation in the program. So these are basically the main financing schemes that have been applied here in Tunisia, and the de-risking measures that were associated with these financing schemes, which involve both technical and financial aspects. If you have any further questions, I'm glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Munji. Obviously, there are several initiatives in Tunisia, but still, that when you speak about small scale and rural context, the communities work in rural context, although they have access to electricity, they don't have the capital to invest in even in renewable energy for water pumping, due to certain, I would say, trade-offs that exist between different sectors to unlock the microfinancing. And that's why I think some of the recommendations come up from the speakers. I would like this maybe a prompt question to Quentin from Angie. It's Angie or Angie, because en français it's Angie, no? One of the elements we found in rural context in where we operated basically in 3 countries, which are in Africa mostly, Arab countries, we identified that when it comes to the small companies, there are not enough incentives due to the, sometimes the awareness, sometimes it's the mechanism specifically on where you operate. You really very much showed the water sector, the other sector that links to the business, where you focus in your area, where you have the competitive advantage. So if I may ask, what really led Angie initial venture to really invest in the small scale renewable energy? Similar what you did in mini-grid, specifically when it comes to the productive use. What's make you, really focus in your area of work in this, and which comparable to others, maybe they find it high risk and low return on investment?
Yes, thank you. So part of the new strategy of ENGIE that was defined in 2016 is what we call the 3D. So first D is for decentralization, meaning that we produce energy in a decentralized way compared to the former way with the nuclear plants, coal plants, etc. with the renewable energy, we produce energy in a decentralized way. So this is the first D. Second is decarbonization, of course. We want to produce clean energy. And third is digitalization, meaning that we use the digital tools in order to bring the power, to bring the energy where it is consumed, and to pay also for it. And actually what we are doing with mini grids in rural Africa is fully aligned with those 3D, because we install decarbonized energy in a decentralized way, and people pay electricity with mobile money, so with digital tool. And also we actually can monitor what is happening on site from anywhere in the world, thanks to digital tools, also different platforms. So actually what we are doing is fully aligned with the new strategy of NG. And even if it's more risky, I think the other reason is it's also very impactful. And NG is part of also of those companies who wants to have impact and not only profit.
Thank you very much. And it's clear always when it comes, there is a vision very much aligned with what's done, and improving, looking to also the aspect of the social and economic environmental. Certainly, maybe the time frame would be longer, but the impact would be high and inclusive. Thank you very much, and we'll certainly try to visit Tanzania soon. And since we speak about the integrated approach, I would like to revert back to Sandra and the excellent intervention you made looking to the barriers, but also the solutions. At the COP, similar to all the COPs, there was the focus on climate finance, and specifically, albeit for adaptation mitigation in our region, is the lowest, between 5 and 6%. But in the rural context, specifically on small scale, it has not really the advantage really to have what we can consider as a acceptable financing for those who need it. So from your perspective, how you see we can upscale or leverage the climate finance in a rural context, let's say one link to the productive use? Over to you, Sandra.
Yeah, thank you, Radia. I think it needs to have a specific allocations that is dedicated for small scale, like I've mentioned earlier. And within that, it needs to have a different type of instruments when it comes to accessing the finance. We know that different countries, different communities has different ability and capacity to pay. And that can include, a variation models from a soft loan, soft patient loans, like, long term, with a very low interest rates. I know that the Green Climate Funds, for example, they put an interest rate between 1 to 3%. Maybe we can still maintain that, but it's not definitely higher, because there are an additional middle financing institution that will going to manage that, whether that management fees will sufficiently can cover that kind of burden, but it's not to be burdened to the end users. And secondly, we can also develop a mechanism on result-based financing, and that would be much more useful for what I call a product developers in the market, so that they can pay as long as people are actually paying for that. Another solutions, if it's going to be like a more bulky orders or bulky mobilizations for certain solutions, then a guarantee fund most probably can also be one of the instruments. So it has to be different types of that to be posted. And if possible, because we are reaching out the most vulnerable communities, a combination from from a government funding, from a could also plays a role, in addition for no household definitely cannot pay anything. Subsidy mechanism, or any form of having that inclusions actually exists. So first thing first, in summarizing this is actually to have a specific budget allocation dedicated for that small scale and being monitored in terms of the disbursement, that it has to be disbursed with less complicated requirements, and it's targeting to developing a pipeline with different financing mechanism tools that I've mentioned earlier.
Thank you very much. Before taking questions from the audience, there was one aspect that we spoke about related to the matchmaking. I think one of the elements specifically on when it comes to the small scale, the renewable energy project pipeline. Well, let's say the project pipeline that are small scale renewable technologies, inclusive with the water and agriculture sectors. And for this, it comes to my mind the presentation of Kevin. I think you spoke about the gender impact platform. Maybe it's good to follow up on that after the session. Is to see is this a platform related to matchmaking between project pipelines and financial institutions as well, linked to the gender aspect in data, or is it mostly on the data, the gender data that supports decision making? What's for and how the matchmaking obviously would work from your perspective when it's come to the small scale?
Thanks very much. Yeah, so I think everyone can use more data. It's an issue across sectors, but especially in energy access. I think disaggregated data is sorely lacking. In terms of the matchmaking platform, I think it makes sense in my head to bring in more impact investors and link them through some kind of matchmaking platform, especially with national companies rather than kind of international companies, to try and keep profits within local economies, to keep them within the country, I think is quite important, and to build up the local economy in general in terms of jobs beyond just productive uses and different value chains. I think if we're talking about decentralized systems, we're talking about millions of smaller products and several thousand mini grids, probably millions across the world. And that requires aggregation, and it can be quite costly to do various smaller projects, transaction costs, and so forth. So I think it's quite important in general to do aggregation, but when we talk about rural communities and we're talking about platforms and perhaps aggregating demand around mini grids for livelihoods or individual products, I think there remains a challenge in reaching rural folks. Many still don't have signal. Where there is signal, many don't have smartphones, for example, which a lot of companies are looking to leverage. There's limited digital literacy around smartphones. So there's a lot of barriers, and the gap between men and women in terms of internet usage, smartphone usage, et cetera, in rural areas is quite large as well. And that's true of rural versus urban and so forth. So I think certainly aggregating demand is something that's quite important, but there remains a lot of challenges with using the technology, accessing technology, let alone the financing aspect of it.
Thank you very much. Since we spoke about the Arab region, I would like I have a question to Munji, but before that, Munji, there is also a question in Arabic for your consideration. If you can please respond to it, it's on the chat box. Before that, since you reflected on what is available in Tunisia and on the instruments that are available, from your perspective, immediate action from policy makers or policy interventions in order to upscale the investment in small scale, since even if you speak about Tunisia and the region, still very far when it's come to the small scale, and even more on renewable energy in terms of large investment as well. But let's focus on the small scale. So what are the immediate policy interventions that are needed to enable the conducive, inclusive environment for investment? Over to you, Munji.
Thank you, Radia. Well, in terms of policy, first of all, the fund that was developed in Tunisia for the energy transition is a good idea. It has to be reinforced, and it has to be well directed to the different areas, and in particular, the small-scale renewable energy systems. The case of Tunisia, where you have about over 98% of the households are connected to the grid. You can base most of the small-scale systems on grid connected, and this helps the country in also facing some of the challenges related to the increase in power demand. So actually, there is a win-win situation there, where the policymakers can use. Also, in terms of making available the financing instruments to the different people, and they can continue to use the power distribution companies. And in Tunisia there is only one. There is a monopoly, but in different Arab countries you have different power distribution companies, and they can be involved in the process, and I think specific policies can be worked out with these actors to make them a major part in the instruments that will be designed. Also, I think the idea of pre-qualifying equipment and pre-qualifying installers is a good idea, because that way you can ensure that there is technical integrity in the systems that are installed, and in the equipment that in the installers themselves. And here you can work out with the different professional associations that are involved in these with these suppliers, to work out some agreements with them. Finally, I think documentations of the processes, the different processes, is very important, so that the steps are very clear for all the actors, and that way you have clear definitions of the role of each intervention. I think these are some of the aspects on which we can work out with the different actors in the field.
Thank you very much, Munji. Certainly, when it comes to the Arab countries, and obviously why we're referring just to rural context, still the mechanism and financial system that are in place are not always suitable, specifically when it's taken from an inclusive approach, looking to the different sectors. And microfinancing, blended finance are solution, but most of the time it's the investment are through grants and others. Let me take maybe some of the questions from the audience, since we still have, how much time? We still have 15 minutes, 17 minutes. So allow me, Munji, I refer to the Arabic question, if you can hand it, please. I move to the question that we have, the next question, Mustafa.
Yes. So one of the panelists asked that based on the discussions today, what would you say are some of the transferable practices that can be adopted in the Arab region? So that's, I guess, one for many of you to address. And the second question is, do you think that enough is being done on the international scale to mitigate for misinformation and in addressing perceived risks? So I'll open this up to all the panelists, and you're free to address them.
Yeah, I think the second one is very good since it's an international scale and we all look at the financial aspect. So if I may give just in 1 minute each, starting by Sandra.
Yeah.
Do you want to reflect on the risk? What needs to be done on the international scale?
Yeah.
Do you think that enough is being done on the international scale to mitigate for misinformation and in addressing perceived risks when it's come to the microfinancing?
Can you repeat that again? Sorry, Radia.
How we can do if enough was done at the international scale to mitigate for misinformation and addressing perceived risks. Risk be it obviously the risk of the country, which are multidimensional. The risk, what you highlighted, the access to assets. Because at the end of the day, we saw that even we have what is done by international organizations when trying to put that under climate finance. But not too much are put obviously on small scale, or sometimes the amount is very small. And since you are at HEVOS, obviously you work with too many donors on international arena. So from your perspective, what could be done in order to improve the access to information and address the perceived risk of investments?
Yeah, thank you. That's clear. Well, I think from my perspective, there has to be the kind of dialogues between international development organizations or even private developers, like what Angie is doing, that is addressing these issues, to have a direct we call dialogues with international funders, whether it's annually, whether it's once in a while, but just to checking on the reality whether the commitments and the financing is actually hitting and then addressing the issues in the long run. So I don't think we have that kind of capacity opportunities when it comes to that dialogues. I know that there are NGO platforms, but when it comes to voicing, in a certain event, like for example the COP events, there are many happening within that events week, and I'm not sure whether the development organizations is actually pulling our strength together to voice certain issues, as a collective effort. It's not really focusing on different and own perspective or on objective when it comes to voicing the needs or to the international funders. I think if that kind of dialogues can be happened regularly and intended, focusing on this topic, it will definitely going to reduce or to minimize the risk of not able to address, of not able to allocate certain funding to these small groups. When it comes to transferable knowledge or experiences, I think the case of what's happening in the Arab region and in Southeast Asia is quite similar. We are struggling within the same issues. I think we can be, a sort of like a peer-to-peer companion when it comes to replicating what, best practices, what is happening there. But one thing that I highlighted is that, innovative solutions when it comes to productive use of energy is much more growing in the Arab or in the in the African region, because there are lots of what you call opportunities to test around on technology, business models, rather than in Asia, because we have much more what you call limited scope in terms of policy for these players to actually testing out their technology or their business case in the country. That idea.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Maybe I want to maybe return back to the business model of Angie, and since you have the integrated report of the umbrella strategy, What you see the opportunities in the coming years, and what are the key success metrics from your perspective? Obviously on the small scale renewable energy.
Yes, I think that there are two main elements. So the first one, of course, is the funding. We still need subsidies in order to make those business viable. And 50% of our investments are coming actually from grant and subsidies. So from the World Bank, from the European Union, etc. So according to International Agency for Energy, we need to install 150,000 mini grids in Africa in order to connect about to 50 million people. So if you look at that in the perspective of the cost of each mini grid, it means that we need about 60 billion USD, $60 billion to invest in order to connect those 250 million people. So part of it will come from the private sector, of course, but part of it also needs to come from the public sector and from the World Bank, European Union, etc., the big donors. For the moment, this money is not here. So we regularly talk about the 100 billions that needs to come from advanced countries to southern countries for the climate change. But this is per year. We just need 60 billion as an investment, not per year, but as investment. So this is the first element, of course, the funding. And then the second element, I think I will just agree with what Sandra said. And I think we forget so much the SDG 17, which is partnership. Our business is only about partnership. There is the government putting some money and some regulation. There is the NGOs putting some people, some methods, etc. There is the private sector putting some money, some expertise. So we need everybody together. There is also donors, of course, putting some funds. But we will only achieve this scale up if we all work together, because we are complementary. We don't do the same things. So we need to work together. And I think this type of platform where we exchange together, where we identify where are the weakness, where are the needs, is very important. So yeah, don't forget SDG 17.
Thank you very much. And certainly the stakeholder engagement, this is not only stakeholder engagement, but partnerships is key, and partnerships also between the sectors when it comes to look into the different water, energy, agriculture, and other sectors. And this is what I think there's the missing point on with the financial institutions, maybe to look at to build their capacity on the knowledge, the financial language linked to the language that we use in the energy, and also to build their capacity together with others so we can have effective partnerships. I want also to move to Kevin. I think we're to the one of the questions, if you want to take one of them that are in the chat box. Kevin.
Great, thanks very much. Could not agree more with Quentin in terms of everyone's roles, and everyone has a responsibility to play, and kind of to address those mutual risks that all of us are perceiving. I think we need better information and better information flows, and part of that is better metrics, and metrics that are actually measurable, easily, economically. Impacts are still tend to be measured in formulaic ways, using average family sizes and these kinds of assumptions with little based on actual evidence. So building out better metrics, standards across the industry really can really, I think, unlock a lot of climate finance, adaptation, resilience from impact investors, from public institutions, and so forth. So I think at least for institutions like IIED, part of our role is to try and dig out those metrics, base them on deep longitudinal studies in the evidence, and kind of build out those frameworks so that others can work from there.
Thank you very much. I think there is a question in the Arabic emoji. I don't know if I may read it. It's related to thinking about the information of this conference. and saying what the strategy for each geographical region in order to increase the efficiency of the energy use or the use of renewable energy, and if this just by changing the equipment to modern equipment, so if you can reply to him, Munji, please.
Well, I would like to have some precisions regarding the question, because usually we talk about energy efficiency, not energy efficiency of renewable energy systems. So I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
Yeah, it's fine. I think it just related to the response is clear, is that obviously the investment in renewable energy is when we invest in renewable energy, we need to ensure that we address energy efficiency and ensure that whatever equipment, even the productive use. I think Mr. Fadi Jabari, he is also relating to the productive equipment. Sometimes when we purchase them, they should be also energy efficient, even while using renewable energy for electricity. And this obviously is a common practice and should be followed as a common practice. Certainly, the challenges are there. We try to look at the different perspectives in looking to how to upscale investment in small-scale renewable energy when it comes to productive use. And maybe one of the last question to Kevin, if I may, because one of the things that Angie tried to highlight is the partnership, but the partnership also how to through the research work that also you are undertaking, how in a rural context, since it's very much linked to different sectors, agriculture, water, energy, and all of them, with the social, obviously, they are all interlinked. So how to basically enhance the synergies and address the trade-offs when taken from the small-scale businesses and small-scale renewable energy technologies and use and access to finance, obviously.
Shall I take that one now?
Yes.
Great.
Please.
Yes, as I mentioned at the beginning, and I think we can all agree, energy is an enabler of different development sectors. So rightfully across these different sectors, we need, I mean, the simple, not so simple answer is an integrated approach. It's messy, it's complicated, it's expensive, sometimes resource intensive. But from the research aspect, our goal is ultimately better outcomes for folks, for farmers, for fishers, and so forth. So how do we get there? So we're trying our best to understand their challenges, building on their needs, and integrating all the necessary market functions that tend not to be there. And this is true of across these sectors and in many different markets. Access to appliances, access to finance for those appliances, access to finance for the business itself, so on and so forth. So, part of that is an integrated approach, which requires partnerships. And those partnerships, depending on partners' business models and so forth, require donor funding. They require impact investors. It's a whole mess of things. So it's not an easy answer or a simple answer. It's quite complicated, actually. But it does require some intensive design and co-design with communities as well.
Yeah, indeed. And so I think we can speak for a long time on these issues, and maybe the time would not allow. And that's why I would like to give the floor to my colleague Mustafa for giving us what he have taken as a takeaway from this webinar. Mustafa, the floor is yours.
Yes, very much so. Thank you to the moderator and definitely to our experts for that lively discussion. Bear with me a second just to load up some of the key points. I'd like to take this opportunity to wrap up just a few of the interesting points from today's discussion. Quentin mentioned that only way to ensure revenue is above cost is if enough electricity is consumed. So therefore, we need to ensure that demand is ramped up through productive use activities. And so partnering with microfinance institutions will be pivotal to fill the gap in between to ensure that end users have access to productive use equipment, but also that we must adopt or support end users in running machinery, and that requires partnering with NGOs, which is also pivotal to carry out training to enhance capacities in operation and sustaining equipment. Sandra addressed several supply and demand side barriers, including limited access to information and unfavorable policy environments, but also highlighted opportunities in the form of readily available blended finance facilities and a swathe of early adopters. Sandra also highlighted that there are concerns over general awareness biases and visibility, and that there is limited prioritization of vulnerable groups over emissions reduction and returns on investments. Kevin expressed the need to consider different categories of socioeconomic data points, groups, and power dynamics, and provided some insightful learnings from Kenya, in that empowering women was correlated with increased agricultural yields for both male and female managed farms. He also noted that engagement can be more effective if people are categorized, for example, running breakout days for people with similar interests to ensure that participants are comfortable and can openly share concerns and solutions. Munji highlighted several programs in Tunisia that can be adapted for small-scale rural areas, with financing schemes that include direct subsidies coupled with low interest rate loans from participating banks and insurance to provide guarantees to the lenders. There was a general agreement that benefits should be internalized as much as possible by localizing tenders and partners, increasing profits, and building capacities. Last, that matchmaking platforms are needed, certainly to cover financing needs, but also to fill information gaps. And as Quentin rightfully put at the end, we must not neglect SDG 17, and that is an importance of partnerships. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for your participation. I'll hand it back to Rabia to conclude.
Thank you very much. I have nothing to add except that I would like to ask all the speakers to put their video on, and also my colleagues who are connected, so we can take the group photo. I think the topic of today, similar to others, is looking obviously to an area where a lot of work need to be done and can be done, provided that partnerships is enhanced and provided that we enhance synergies and address trade-offs to enable the just inclusive energy transition and ensure that we leave no one behind, and ensure also that we are all moving the same track. Thank you very much, Mustafa, for coordinating this webinar, for my colleagues Sean and Maya attending with me in the same room. And I would like so to ask all the participants, for those who have the camera, who can put it on so my colleague can take the picture. I would like to really thank all the panelists one by one, if I miss anyone. So I started by Kenin and Sandra, Kevin, Mustafa, and Munji. Thank you very much, and let's continue to be connected, whether from Beirut or connected also in Tanzania or in Asia, very much like the place where I put in there, and Kenya as well. Thank you very much. And with that, we take the group photo. We're done? C'est bon. Got it. Merci. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Shukran.